Emily Chang in San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, with the presidential election just days away, the stakes getting higher, the campaigns getting louder on social media. We will talk strategies, candidates, and even algorithms with someone who's been there, done that. Plus, at a time when campaign fundraisers and rallies would be flooding U.S. cities, what is the future of live events in a more virtual world? Eventbrite CEO Julia Hartz will be our guest. And another heat wave in the Northwest. Wildfires continue to rage in California and Colorado. How technology can battle the blaze. But first, stocks ending the week mixed. We saw a tech slide on a busy options day, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi saying a divide still persisting in stimulus talks with the White House. Let's get the latest from Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle. Abigail, walk us through the day.
Well, another bumpy one, not surprisingly, Emily. Seems very fitting to the week, of course, the month, and this year. So, earlier today we had some pretty decent gains for stocks. It is, of course, options expiration day, which tends to bring some volatility, and we did see that into the close, because often you have traders who need to hedge on different positions around the underlying, around the options to the underlying security. So on this, you see the NASDAQ 100 earlier today up pretty sharply, and then closing right around the time of the close down about 0.4%. So a bit of a bearish reversal there for the NASDAQ 100. And one of the big drags there, interestingly, Emily, was Amazon really giving up some big gains on the day. Citi today is saying that the Prime Day may not have been as inspired as it was last year, something we talked about earlier this week, since the stock was actually down both of the days of that event. Sometimes the traders, when they are hearing news of some sort through whatever sources, you'll see that kind of action. So on the week, the NASDAQ 100, you see that Apple and Zoom were two of the big point boosts. In fact, Apple up for a fourth week in a row. Zoom on the week up 13.5%. And they, of course, unveiled some new products that folks are excited about. But there is Amazon.com, because of today's big slide, a down week. So a split between those mega caps, really pretty interesting. It'll be also interesting to see how next week takes shape with Amazon.com sliding so bearishly into the close. And speaking of next week, Netflix, of course, will be reporting on Tuesday, kicking off the reporting season for the mega caps, down 1.6%. The whisper number is for 5 million subscribers to have been added. Let's see whether or not that happens. And overall, on the week, Emily, it was risk on, because the NASDAQ 100, even though it did slide into the close today on the options expiration day, up once again on the week. In fact, up for a fourth week in a row. And Emily, it's very interesting, because not only were stocks higher in the week, you also had commodities higher in the week, and you also had Haven bonds and the dollar. So it was basically an everything rally week, and with a little bit of volatility right there at the end, Emily. And actually, I should mention in between, too, because of all the choppiness that we've been talking about all week.
All right. Well, we'll see what's in store next week. Abigail, thanks so much for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend. Digital strategy has always been at the forefront of election campaigns, but as the dependency on social media rises, so does the responsibility. What exactly is big tech's role in democracy when the digital scape has never been more important or influential? The former digital director of President Obama's re-election campaign and an advisor to Hillary Clinton's campaign and co-founder of Precision Strategies, Teddy Goff, joins us now to talk about all things digital in the election that is now just days away. Teddy, things are heating up. Lots of action between the campaigns on social media over the last week. Talk to us about the conversations that are happening right now in each camp as it pertains to how we exploit and use the internet to get our message out in these final days?
Well, thanks for having me, Emily. Obviously, the last, we're 18 days away. The last 18 days of a campaign are a pretty intense period, even more so now because so many states, I think it's 42, have introduced new expanded forms of early voting or vote by mail due to the pandemic that they didn't have in 2016. So I would expect that both campaigns are operating on, very little sleep, lots of coffee, takeout, candy bars. It's not a healthy place to be at this point. Obviously, they're remote, at least on the Biden campaign, rather than together. I think that there's a broad perception in both parties that there aren't a lot of persuadable voters out there. The Trump strategy has been, honestly, since 2015, since his first campaign, a base, sort of excitement and mobilization strategy. That wasn't necessarily the case for Democrats in 16. 2016, but it's certainly the case to a higher degree now, where we're really focused on turnout on Black and brown voters, people who may have been demobilized in 16, people who may have a very difficult time voting due to the restrictions that the Republicans have put up, making it more difficult for them to vote, and making sure that all those people feel inspired to vote and then have the means and the wherewithal and the education of how to vote. So I think there's a lot less of a focus on the sort of so-called swing voter, and lots of focus on finding every last person who's already made up their mind for you and making sure they decide to vote rather than to vote for you.
Now, the social media platforms have been taking firmer stands in sometimes unexpected ways in the last few days, taking a stand on the New York Post story. For example, Facebook changing its position on Holocaust deniers, banning QAnon. Is this actually going to have an impact, or is it too late?
In terms of the election, I think it's probably too late. I do want to applaud the moves. Facebook in particular, but also Google, which is the parent company of YouTube, obviously, Twitter, differently. They've all had a relatively laissez-faire approach to content that was either hateful or had the potential to incite violence, to disinformation campaigns and so forth. And we've seen them all sort of move toward a more aggressive moderation approach in the past couple of days and weeks, most notably the couple of examples that you cited. In terms of the election, I think it's probably too late to swing a lot of voters. I do think that they may have laid down some very important precedent that will govern how they handle misinformation as to the results themselves, or potential disinformation campaigns in the days following the election. If people want to, one candidate wants to claim victory who didn't, let's be honest, Donald Trump wants to claim victory if he didn't win, or if someone wants to use these platforms to incite violence. So I think part of what they're doing may be less about influencing the next 18 days and more about getting an infrastructure in place to be prepared for the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks that may follow that, and all the mayhem that we're all worried may occur. But I think the bigger impact of this is really in the long term. Disinformation isn't going anywhere. Obviously, divisiveness and hate speech aren't going anywhere. And it's interesting, and I think pretty important, that we've seen these companies change their tunes, in sort of small-ish ways, but the ways that maybe setting an example or a precedent going forward as to how they're going to handle these kinds of things.
Now, just today, there's some new reporting from the Wall Street Journal about how Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg have handled politics more broadly, reporting that the engineers tweaked the algorithm in favor of conservative news sources. I've been reading this tweet storm from the editor-in-chief of Mother Jones. Among her tweets, Facebook is a garbage company. These changes that Facebook made really hurt websites like Mother Jones. What is your take on this, given that, as you say, it's probably too late for the election? If damage has been done, it's done.
Well, the outcome of the election is hugely important, but we've got also the whole, future of human history to worry about as well. So I welcome any kind of progress. I think the problem has been that all of these companies, not just Facebook is obviously always undergoing the most scrutiny, but all of these companies have had an attitude since day one that they're platforms. They're not publishers. They don't put their thumb on the scale for or against any kind of content. You, the user, can say what you want, and they're not there to get in the way of that. And there's always been a bit of a dishonesty to that, because as soon as they introduced algorithms, then they are in the business of putting their thumb on the scale for or against certain kinds of content. It's not like a newspaper style gatekeeper, an individual saying, I want to boost this post and derank that post, but there's a complex algorithm that is making decisions as to which posts you see when you log in. It's not simply a chronological feed of everybody you follow and what they've said recently. And so, I think what that's done is actually, probably more inadvertently than on purpose, had the effect of boosting the most incendiary stuff, the most divisive stuff, the stuff that gets people riled up. And that's why the rise of the far right, not just in the US, but all around the world, and the rise of hate speech and this utter divisiveness in the States, that's why that has all sort of coincided with the rise of social media. It's not exclusively due to social media, but I think social media has accelerated all of those all those trends. And so, I think obviously, everybody has strong feelings about what's going to happen in 18 days. It's hugely important. It's hugely consequential for the next 4 years and a lot of time after that. But I think the bigger question is, how do we get our country back to a place where our politics functions? How do we, how do we do our best to sort of stomp out hate speech, the QAnon type conspiracy theories that have taken over not 1 or 2%, sort of fringe populations, but 20 or 30% of the population, members of Congress being elected who believe in this stuff because they're getting it online. And so they've taken some pretty meaningful steps to sort of begin to tamp that down. They've also obviously exposed themselves to a lot of, a lot of criticism. I think the fact that they've had such a policy of sort of non-intervention for so long means that intervention can look like bias if you're the person being intervened against. And I expect the right to, in particular, to be pretty upset as their candidates and their people face not all of the moderation, but the lion's share of the moderation, under these new sorts of precedents.
Absolutely. It is going to be a rocky few days, an explosive 18 days, I'm sure. Teddy Goff, co-founder of Precision Strategies, always good to have you here on the program. Coming up, Google strengthens its defense by enlisting 2 veterans for an antitrust showdown with the Department of Justice. All the details next. This is Bloomberg. Alphabet's Google is joining forces with 2 prominent law firms with experience fighting antitrust cases as the company readies to battle against the U.S. government. The DOJ expected to file a major antitrust lawsuit in the coming days. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's Garrett DeVink, who covers Google for us. So, Garrett, what's the significance of Google hiring these lawyers as we wait for this big case?
Yeah, it's a pretty regular move for them. I mean, this is going to be a big case that will take months, maybe years for it to finally wind its way to a conclusion. And it's pretty normal to hire outside lawyers. I think the interesting thing just in terms of who they hired is they're both people who actually worked on the government side when the government sued Microsoft 20 years ago at a pretty similar landmark case. So they know how the government might be thinking in this situation.
Now, speaking of that, since the House report dropped that could pave the way for the breakup of big tech, we've been talking to a number of folks on the show, their opinion, should big tech be broken up? I spoke to investor Bill Gurley yesterday, and he made this point about Microsoft's struggles with antitrust scrutiny back in the day. Take a listen.
The government restricting Microsoft's ability to leverage their way through the browser opened the door for Facebook, Google, Amazon. If they had been able to tie the browser to search the way they did, the way they went after Netscape aggressively, I think they would have succeeded. They're really good at that stuff. And so the irony perhaps is that I think the government doing this in the past created the window for many of these companies.
It's looking worse for Google, Garrett. How is Google responding to the scrutiny so far?
Yeah, I mean, the latest news, the latest sort of reporting that's come out by us and others on what the federal government is actually going to look at is specifically search distribution agreements. That's when Google pays a whole bunch of money to companies like Apple or Mozilla Firefox to make sure that Google search is the default position on those places. And it's really interesting because I think that this could actually in some ways help Google. Like if it's legal to pay for that distribution, Google will save a lot of money because most consumers will probably still choose Google given the opportunity. And so the way the case is looking right now, we don't actually know specifically what it's going to look like, but what's coming out of reporting says that this might not actually be as bad as people were thinking a month or two ago. And so we've been told it's coming. So we're really just in the position of waiting to see what is the government actually going to go after, and then we can assess and answer that question.
All right, Bloomberg's Garrett DeVink, who covers Google and Alphabet for us, will continue to watch your reporting on this and wait for that filing. Coming up, Amazon Prime Day often boasts big savings for Prime members, but this year the e-commerce titan delivered big sales, they say, for small and medium businesses as well. A conversation with Dharmesh Mehta of Amazon's marketplace business is next. This is Bloomberg. Amid calls to shop small and support local, often struggling small businesses, some viewed Amazon's Prime Day this week as antithetical to the effort. But think again. Third-party sellers, most of which are small businesses, surpassed $3.5 billion in sales on Prime Day, an increase of nearly 60% from last year. I caught up with Dharmesh Mehta, Vice President of Amazon's Marketplace business, on the record-breaking event.
This year we decided, particularly given how small businesses have been hit with the pandemic this year, that we wanted to do even more to help small businesses. And so this year, one of the key things that we went much bigger on was how we help support and empower small businesses. And, this started 2 weeks ago. We started a promotion where Amazon will invest over $100 million over Prime Day and the Q4 holiday, specifically helping customers connect with small businesses. And we're in this promotion that was, as simple as if a customer spent $10 buying from a small business, Amazon would give them a $10 credit. And, it was really exciting to see that over that 2-week period leading up to Prime Day, customers spent over $900 million buying products from small businesses. And in the 2 days of Prime Day that just closed, small and medium businesses and our third-party sellers represented $3.5 billion of sales just in those 2 days, which is up 60% over last year. It's a huge growth. And amidst what's been a really tough year, we've been excited about how this has worked out well for small businesses on Prime Day.
So what are people buying? What's been the most popular kinds of products? What kinds of small businesses are faring the best?
What's been awesome is there's a huge diversity. It's things like top selling electronics and, Sonos sound bars and, those name brands that lots of people know, but also all sorts of creative products from small businesses.
What is what you're learning telling you about holiday demand, holiday trends, and what kind of clues are you getting about how Amazon can better prepare for the holiday season?
I think every holiday season is always a time when a lot of customers go out and look for amazing products. A lot of small businesses within, really amazing products sell a lot during that period. And one of the things we try to remind folks for this year, it is a unique year. And I think there are going to be probably more folks shopping online with what's going on with COVID-19. So we try to remind folks, not to wait to the last minute and to try and, if you're a customer, try and get your shopping done early. And if you're a small business, launch your new products and get selling early. And so it's going to be a unique holiday period. I don't think it's going to be just the last 1 week crunch. I actually think in many ways that holiday season's already kicked off. And you see some of that with the great success of small businesses over Prime Day.
I was speaking to an analyst who suggested that there might be some pull forward demand from the holidays here, given how aggressive some of the deals were, which would help Amazon from a logistics perspective over the holidays. Is there any truth to that?
I think we're going to have great deals. We've had great deals started 2 weeks ago. We had great deals on Prime Day. We have great deals launching every day. And I think that's going to continue all the way through the holidays. A lot of this will depend on when customers choose to do their shopping. And it's going to be an interesting time period. We've added, since last year, we've added almost 60 million cubic feet of standard storage capacity across our fulfillment centers to just help aid in the increased, demand and what we're seeing from customers and small businesses going into holiday.
Now, I know you are focusing on small businesses, and I can't help but think about how the marketplace is at the center of this antitrust scrutiny from Congress. The House report had some pretty unflattering language about how Amazon treats its sellers, accused Amazon of bullying its sellers. What's your response to that?
The thing I would tell anyone is that small businesses are critical to the success of our store. They bring amazing selection for customers. They bring great prices. And what we've been able to do over the last 20 years by inviting, third-party selling partners to bring their amazing products into our store and sell right alongside us has been great, not only for customers who get this vast selection, the ability to compare across prices and get very convenient delivery, but also gives these small businesses the ability to reach customers, not just in their small local town, but all across the state, the country, and even the world. Small businesses exported more than $3 billion of product that, you think about just the physical store and who can reach it, that they can now do through online. And so it's been a great win for customers and for small businesses and for Amazon in providing that store.
Now, what about things like fake reviews and counterfeits? I know that's something you've been trying to crack down on. And I imagine there's, with more activity online, it's a constant battle. How much progress have you made there?
It's critical that whether you're a customer shopping in our store or you're a small business selling in our store, that we every day work super hard to earn your trust. And that starts by proactively preventing any of this fraud, abuse, fake reviews from ever happening in our store. We invest tremendous resources there. We continue to make progress, but it's an ongoing battle. And we're going to keep fighting to make sure we're staying ahead so that customers and sellers in our store can trust in the trustworthy shopping experience.
Given all of the demand that Amazon has experienced over the pandemic and some of the logistical issues that you worked through, some of your competitors like Target and Walmart, also saw a flood of demand. So how well positioned do you think you are to compete against them over the holidays now that they've stepped up to the plate, perhaps more than they did in years past, and their ability to compete with you has improved?
It's absolutely true that the entire retail sector has a lot of competition. It has a lot of vibrant competition. And I think through the COVID-19 pandemic, you've seen a lot of innovation and a lot of growth in different sectors of the retail segment. But for us, we really just stay focused on the customer. How do we continue to delight our customers with amazing products, great prices, new innovations, convenient delivery? And that really is squarely where we're focused. And we're going to continue to work really hard to delight our customers.
My conversation there with Dharmesh Mehta, Vice President of Amazon Marketplace and its Amazon Marketplace business. Nextdoor, meantime, is considering options to go public, including an IPO. The social network for neighbors sharing information or trading goods and services is targeting a valuation in the range of $4 to $5 billion. According to PitchBook, Nextdoor has raised about $470 million and was last valued at $2.2 billion after a funding round in September 2019. We'll keep an eye on that one. Coming up, the pandemic has wreaked havoc on in-person events and companies that support them. We're going to hear from Eventbrite CEO Julia Hartz on how her company is switching gears to prepare for a more virtual future and this year's election. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. With a presidential election just 3 weeks away, fundraisers and campaign rallies would normally be flooding cities across the United States. This year, as the global pandemic continues, candidates have had to pivot to a largely digital presence. Companies in the events business have been pivoting too. So what is the future of live events in a more digital world? We are joined now by Eventbrite CEO Julia Hartz. Julia, always good to have you. We've been talking a bit about how the business and the industry is pivoting at this time. When it comes to the election specifically, give us a snapshot on how different events are in this election year versus the last election year.
Thanks for having me, Emily. It's great to see you. This year is an exceptional year as compared to 2016. We're seeing events related to the election and voting up over 30% as compared to that election season. We're seeing about half of those events happening online, and the other half are happening in person through things like phone bank volunteering or small socially distanced events. So there's a high degree of activity happening right now. And really, I feel like it's like people are rising. They're showing up. On Eventbrite, we launched Ticket to Vote, which we announced with you a couple months ago. We've had over 20,000 registrations in terms of people voting while they're also buying a ticket to an event.
Now, what about more broadly? What sort of activity are you seeing on the platform? How many of those events overall are virtual versus in person?
Well, the vast majority of events today on Eventbrite are in-person events. These are smaller, hyper-local community events that are coming back in a socially distanced and safe way. There's the average attendance of an event on Eventbrite is less than 50 attendees. So these are really the bread and butter of our platform. And as we see creators become more and more creative in terms of bringing events back to the real life space, we're seeing really delightful things happen. My favorite one right now is Seltzerland, which is happens on a golf course, and it's a hard seltzer tasting event where you come with a group of 7 people or less. You wear masks as you're traversing the tees, and you're able to have a good out in the open with friends in a really safe way.
You're also announcing that you've hit over 1 million events in 2020. How is that number compared to what you thought you would hit, or is it more, is it less?
Well, the 1 million number is exciting because it's virtual events that have happened this year, which, as you recall, was a very small part of our business coming into 2020. And as COVID hit, it was a nice shock absorber for our customers' businesses to have the ability to pivot to virtual events. So while they're not the vast majority of the events that are on the platform today, they are growing, and they're a significant way for our creators to pivot. And I think one of the really interesting things about online events is it gives creators a way to not only connect with their communities and keep that connection going, but also be able to expand to a global audience. And that's been something that the Eventbrite platform has done really well for them, is help them drive demand to a more just global audience in general for their previously hyperlocal events.
Now, this week we saw Zoom announce a comprehensive solution for folks to host and monetize virtual events. What does that mean for you? Is that a concern?
I think it's important to put it into context and understand the focus and product differentiation. So, we're in a big market, and we have a big addressable market, and online events are a COVID-related phenomenon. So it makes sense that people want to be in that space, and that, people are looking to participate in that value chain. I think that what Zoom does is really connect us very well. And I have a lot of respect for the company, which is why we integrated Eventbrite with Zoom. And the Eventbrite Zap actually allows for Eventbrite customers to take advantage of the depth of our solutions, as well as have ease of use for streaming their events. And I think that the product differentiation is simple. We wake up every day and live and breathe events. We have gone really deep in understanding the needs of the frequent creator, and we offer self-service and complex ticketing needs. So we've seen a lot of people enter this space in 2020. As with Facebook or Google, it typically goes to a point of simple ticketing. It's harder to go deeper with a core customer when it's just a product line versus everything that we do, we build for the event creator. So I think it's a validation of our business. I'm excited to have, more innovation and competition in this space. And we're really focused on giving our creators what they need to be successful.
Now, as you look ahead, we're heading into winter. There's bound to be a winter flare across this country. How are you planning your future? How are you mapping out your objectives when we have no idea how much longer this is going to go on or how bad it is going to be?
Well, we're really focused on the next 3 years because we can't predict what's going to happen next month, as you know, and certainly we have, shored up our own company expenses. We've raised capital to have more than 6 years of runway at this current burn rate. We are prepared for the worst. But as we look at the 3-year horizon, I think something really magical is going to happen. We will gather again, and hyper-local, smaller events are going to be the ones that bring us back together because we'll feel safe. We'll feel like we can control our environment. And again, that's our bread and butter. That is the vast majority of the 1 million creators that are on our platform today. So we're pretty fired up, Emily. We've gone through something that many businesses have never seen in their history. And we're focused on the sort of 3-year horizon and where we want to be at the end of those 3 years.
And the best innovation often happens in times of crisis. Julia Hartz, CEO of Eventbrite, always good to have you here on the show. Thank you so much for stopping by. All right, coming up, a farm of the future inside a warehouse and run partly by robots. Not too far from San Francisco. We're going to speak to the CEO of Plenty, a SoftBank-backed indoor vertical farming company, next. This is Bloomberg. Wildfires, power outages, and extreme weather continue to ravage California. The blazes have scorched more than 4.1 million acres so far, and now the economic toll is starting to become clearer as the cost of fighting the fires hits $1.1 billion. What role is technology going to play? Joining us now, Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, who's been following this story. And Ed, it's hot outside, the air is dry, the red flag warning in my area just got extended. What is the latest on the fires in this area?
Yeah, so in the last hour, the state's governor, Gavin Newsom, has tweeted that he's spoken to President Trump, and President Trump has approved a major disaster declaration request for the state of California over wildfires in various counties. It's really important because that declaration of disaster allows those that are affected in communities hit by fires, businesses that have been destroyed. We've seen the images of people evacuated from their homes. It means that FEMA or the Federal Emergency Management Agency can release funds, give people money to help put them into temporary housing, replace damage, help with businesses that have lost business because of the fires that have taken place. Originally, the president and the White House had not granted that declaration because they said the data submitted by the state of California was insufficient, something that Gavin Newsom said he would appeal. But in the end, it appears that he has spoken to the president and they found a consensus. Look, today alone, there are 9,000 firefighters across the state of California who remain on the front lines firefighting 21 specific wildfires that continue to burn. Yesterday, fires we're at a level around 29. So we've seen some containment across the state. Of course, a red flag warning is in place. The conditions, dry weather, very hot. It's likely that that will contribute to further fires. And this is not just California, right? This is extending to the rest of the western states here in the U.S. We know about fires in Oregon and in Washington state. But of course, in Colorado in the last 24 hours, they've had the largest wildfire in that state's history, the Cameron Peak fire, which has burnt 158,000 acres. So this is front and center right now in the U.S., something that politicians at a state and national level are talking about and that they're linking to climate change.
Now, Ed, I spoke with the mayor of San Francisco last week and talked about the impact of the fires, what the city is doing in response to the fires, just how big an emergency this is. Take a listen to what London Breed told me last week.
California cannot be left on its own because it's not just California that's impacted. It's the environment, it's all the other states surrounding us. And so the need to address the issues around the vegetation and preparing for things like this, it is really something we need to start focusing on and investing in order to hopefully prevent this from continuing to happen in this capacity.
We are in the technology capital of the world, Ed. What is the role of technology in battling this blaze?
Yeah, CAL FIRE is using data on those inputs that Mayor Breed was talking about. They've invested in this program called TechnoSilver, which uses a number of data inputs from Department of Defense satellites, from cameras deployed all across the state, as well as just by word of mouth and other local agencies reporting on fires. It uses that data to analyze fires and predict their movements and their growth across different states. It's both predictive, preventative, and reactive. What this company, TechnoSilver, is doing is running 350 million simulations a day, sometimes on fires that don't even exist. They're looking at things like location, the weather, vegetation in that area, and they're running modeling using AI to predict if a fire were to start in that location, how will it spread? And if there's already a fire, then what is the path that fire can take? Then what happens is some units across California in terms of firefighters, they're using their mobile phones, they're using their desktops to analyze that data and make decisions on deployment, where they're going to send crews in order to fight and use containment practices to keep those fires in, but also get ahead of the curve. How can they stop spread early? And that's kind of the preventive measure that I was talking about. A good example was September 9th, where we saw those really heavy fires, really heavy smoke. Ahead of that date, this TechnoSilver platform had already predicted that was going to be a very heavy fire date, that it saw it coming, basically. The issue is that CAL FIRE has spent around $8 million of this. Only some units have it, but they hope to roll it out across the whole state by the end of this year.
All right, Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow, thanks for staying across that for us. We're going to continue to monitor the situation throughout the weekend as this heat wave continues. Now, as these fires continue to ravage the West Coast and Colorado, they've not only burned over 4 million acres, but also devastated farmers in the regions. One indoor vertical farming startup, Plenty, is working to deliver year-round produce from their controlled, resilient farms, despite these extreme weather conditions. The company just raised $140 million in a funding round led by SoftBank's Vision Fund. Joining us now for more, Plenty co-founder and CEO Matt Barnard. So, Matt, I want to talk about Plenty as an alternative for farmers in perhaps a greener future. We've seen so many farmers lose their crops, so many vineyards across the region destroyed. How is Plenty an alternative?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me and having us, Emily. I would say to that question, we consider ourselves and our farms at Plenty to be in addition to the capacity that already exists out in the field. The world is already, we need about 70% more fruits and vegetables for the world to enjoy a nutrient-rich diet. And, so we need more capacity, not less. So we're doing our best to add to that.
So talk to us about the technology and how much of it is reality at this point and how much of it is still moonshot.
Well, you're looking at one of our growing rooms behind you. Our farms produce, first of all, what comes out of them tastes very different from what people are used to, because we're able to control those recipes of climate and light in ways that haven't been possible before. Climate, light, stress, nutrients, those are the things that really drive flavor. And, on the farm that I grew up on, we couldn't control those things. So the farm is real. We're on shelves today, and we're working to bring the food that comes out of our farms to more people by expanding to our Compton farm in 2021.
Whole Foods sells some of your products. What other grocery stores are your clients?
Well, you may have seen we've recently announced a partnership with Albertsons. So we're in many of their Safeway stores today, and are expanding that pilot over the course of the next year. And then with the opening of that Compton farm, we'll be able to. We're planning to serve about 430 stores across California through that Compton farm. And then with Whole Foods and then some of our other local grocery partner chains, we're working to reach as many people in California as we can through our California farms.
You're planning to sell strawberries with Driscoll's. As a huge strawberry consumer with 4 children in the house, are these going to be co-branded? How will the pricing points compare? Talk to us a little bit about how it will work.
Well, here's what we know. We're neighbors down the road from one another, so to speak. And by bringing the farm inside as we've done, in agriculture, growing fruits and vegetables is about combining land, the right climate for a specific crop, and then making sure you have the water and growing season necessary for that crop. Well, as you bring the farm inside, you now control all of those things, and the world has run out of land in the places where it's economic, and all of those things exist in the same place, particularly for berries. And so, what we think it'll mean for people is we get to perfect the berry. Work along with Driscoll's, with our expertise, with their expertise, and their berries to pair the perfect recipe with the perfect berry and give people something they never had before, which is day in and day out, all year long, the most mind-blowing berry experience. So that's our aspiration anyway. And so that's what we think it's going to mean is better berries for more people, because we help relieve those constraints as to where berries can be grown around the world.
Now, given the fires that are raging, the extreme weather we've been facing, concerns about climate change, what is Plenty's role in a greener future? Is this actually a greener way to grow things? I mean, when you're controlling the temperature of the room, the light, it's almost a little Truman Show.
Yeah, it's pretty spectacular to walk into one of our farms. But, one of the things, if you recall, I mentioned that we need about 70% more fruits and vegetables for the world to have what's considered a healthy diet and have the nutrient-rich fruits and vegetables that we need. that would require today, that we, for example, mow down an area roughly the size of the Amazon. And with those wildfires you were just talking about, I think we can agree we can't afford to mow down anymore. So, the footprint that we enable the food chain to have is very favorable relative to any other option available to us today. And then when you think about water, the West is already parched. We rely on places like California for a significant percentage of our fruits and vegetables as the most prolific region in the world for most fruits and vegetables. And so, we save about 1 million gallons a week through one of our farms. And there are parts of the Central Valley, for example, that are an entire telephone pole lower today than they were a century ago because of the rate at which we have been extracting water from the ground. So when you look at water footprint, you look at carbon footprint, and you look really at just what the alternatives are as to where we're going to get our agricultural capacity, that's where we are excited to be able to add to the portfolio of what's available.
Fascinating. We'll keep our eye on the company as it grows. Plenty co-founder and CEO Matt Barnard in an indoor vertical farming room. Thank you so much for joining us. Still ahead, Hulu left hanging. Controlling shareholder Disney has set its sights on a global expansion of direct-to-consumer streaming while leaving Hulu stateside. The reasons next. This is Bloomberg. While watching rivals Netflix and Amazon set up shop over the globe, Hulu was eager to catch up, outlining a strategy to expand the popular streaming service outside the United States. But Disney, its controlling shareholder, had other plans and focused its international ambitions elsewhere. For more, I want to bring in our Bloomberg Entertainment and Media reporter, Lucas Shaw. So a big rearrangement at Disney this week. What does the reorg there mean for Hulu?
I don't know that very many people inside Disney, outside Disney, in Hollywood fully understood that reorganization this week. It's been a source of confusion, including to many people at Disney I've spoken with. The one thing that has been really consistent in Disney's messaging, in which that reorganization was meant to reinforce, is that streaming is the future of that company, this kind of giant media and entertainment conglomerate that has made so much money from cable networks over the past many years is trying to reorient itself around the internet. But the focus for Disney over the past year or two has very clearly been Disney Plus. And even though buying a controlling stake in Hulu was supposedly one of the main reasons Disney completed this multi-billion-dollar deal with Fox, Hulu has been sort of left on sidelines, and the decision to not take it overseas, as Disney Plus has already started to do, is a real head-scratcher and a sign of the fact that it feels a little bit like an orphan. Yet again, this is a company that has always been kind of caught by the whims of its owners, which used to be many and is now just one, and yet it still can't get the freedom that I think many of the employees hoped it would.
Well, and anyone who uses the product, as somebody who, I've got 4 kids, we use Disney Plus a lot in this house. The UI is just so seamless, whereas Hulu is actually quite difficult to navigate as a viewer. I mean, why hasn't it gotten better, given that it was online first?
I think over the past couple of years, it's just not been the same priority. Disney Plus it has Disney in the name, and then it also is the home for all of the brands that are so central to Disney's business right now. It's got Marvel, it's got Pixar, it's got the Disney animated movies. And that just makes it a bigger priority, because those are the ones that lead to theme park rides. Those are the ones that are tied to movies that open big in theaters when movie theaters are open yet again. Whereas Hulu has specialized in what Disney calls more general entertainment, and what I would also refer to as more adult or mature entertainment. It's the place for the shows from FX, the cable network that Disney bought from Fox. It's maybe the place for some of the shows that would be on ABC. And while those have been very valuable to a service like Netflix, and certainly to a service like HBO, it's never been as central to the mission at Disney. And I think Disney's still figuring out how to make those brands all play together.
All right, well, it'll be interesting to watch this reorg at Disney play out and see how it impacts, the ripple effects of it. I'll leave it there, Lucas. I, for one, am going to be looking forward to some streaming video time this weekend with some popcorn on the couch, and I hope you have some as well. That does it for this Friday edition of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. This is Bloomberg.